Well, are those groups opening up on you? Has it been a while since you've kind of done a group check? You've shot a lot of rounds through that barrel. You probably have eroded some of those lands. And now maybe it's time to look at things to see if you need to make some adjustments. Hi everyone, it's the Four Gun Guy. And that's exactly what happened to me. I realized when my group opened up on my competition match load that maybe something was up with my seating depth and my powder charge and all that. Maybe it was time to take a look at things and kind of reassess my cartridge load. So I did, what I have professed and what guys like Eric Cortina have professed. I don't chase the lands, but when I see something like this, I want it to kind of pause, step back, and see if I need to make some changes. Maybe it's a seating depth change. Maybe while I'm doing that, I'm going to look at the charge, the powder charge that I'm dropping. Maybe some velocities dropped off as I've worn in that barrel. So today I wanted to talk to you about that, but with a twist. So there's going to be a twist to this video. It's going to be about the fact that with the way things are today, with the scarcity of projectiles that I can get my hands on, I've actually had to go through 3 different projectile types. Well, if I'm going to do that, and I'm going to start looking at seating depths and powder charges and all that, you're going to have a lot of work in front of you. So let's talk about all that, and we'll see what we come up with. If you're ready to go, let's get to it. Well, I want to first talk about these 3 different projectiles. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that I use the word projectile instead of the quote B word, because YouTube doesn't like that word being used. So we're going to use projectiles. I want to look at this first graphic here, and I'm going to put this up. This is each one of these. Remember, I'm talking about a 140 grain boat tail hollow point, which is here, the 140 grain ELDM, and the 147 grain ELDM projectiles. I wanted to kind of show you, number one, if you look at this picture here, and I'll put it up here, you can actually see the difference in these projectiles, right? I mean, obviously the 147 is longer than the 140, and the 140, which is in the middle, is longer than the 140 boat tail hollow point. So they're different. With that being said, you know, if you've watched other videos, mine, anyone else's, that as we start to define and figure out the seating depth of this projectile in the case that's going to give us the best group SDESs, that kind of combination of things, it all depends on the ogive. Now, I'm not going to go into the definition of the ogive. Basically, it is where this projectile tapers down, and at the point it basically gets to the widest point on that projectile, that's what we're talking about in basic terms. And I'll put the definition up here too. What I want you to realize though is if you look at these numbers here, I just took some rough measurements. I took the length of each one of these things, and you can see that the difference between the 140 ELDM and the boat tail hollow point is 50 thousandths of an inch. The difference between the 147 ELDM and the ELDM is 60 thousandths of an inch, which tells you that the difference between this 147 ELDM, overall length is what I'm talking about here, and the 140 boat tail hollow point is 111 thousandths of an inch between those two, right? Now you may say, hey, that's great, but that ogive should be in the same place. As Lee Corso says, not so fast, my friend. That is not the case, as you can see by some of these other measurements that I took, right? So if I look at the tip of the projectile to the ogive, you can see that they're all different, right? Now, I'm just using these, and if you look at the base to the ogive, they're all different, right? Now, I'm not saying that quite honestly, any of these measurements matter, because it's going to be based on the measurement comparator that you're going to use to measure where your ogive is, right? When you seat. And as you're finding that point that the ogive touches the lands, which is this far right column here, and I use the Wheeler method for this to find out where the cartridge base, so the overall cartridge, and these are all unloaded, right? That's unloaded, no primer, no powder, but the overall cartridge, where from the base of this cartridge up to the ogive, where that engages the lands of the rifling, right? That's what we're trying to find out. Where is that point? Where are these up against the lands of the rifling? And these are those numbers here. So as you can see here, these are totally different numbers as well, right? 2.241, 2.235, 2.197. So really the big point of this video is to tell you that if you start doing this, you've got calculations up the wazoo that you're going to have to make based on each one of these projectiles. You're probably sitting there going, yeah, I mean, I already knew that, but some people may not understand that who are just getting into this. So that's why I wanted to make this kind of clear here. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is the BC of these. So I'm going to bring this BC up as well. Each one of these projectiles has a different ballistic coefficient. Now remember, the ballistic coefficient is, let's go real simple here, how well this projectile cuts through the air, right? I mean, just real simple, down and dirty, that's what it is. The higher the BC, the better the BC. So as you look here on this chart, you can see the 147 grain has the highest BC of all these. The boat tail hollow point, which is no surprise, has the lowest of these three. And it's interesting to just see, I'm not going to talk about it or go through all these, but it's interesting to see the deflection and the drop performance across these projectiles, right? It's interesting to see the differences there. Now, let's move on to some analysis that I got when I started to do my workup, my reload, let's say, to tighten up these groups. Now for this example, I'm going to stick with the 140 ELDM because that is my match projectile for now. So I went through, you know, everything you would normally go through. As you saw in this past segment, I found the CBTO to the lands, so I know what that is. And now what I would do is start doing some testing on seating depth, right? So for this example, I started doing some testing, I think, 40,000, 60, and 80,000s, actually for all three of these projectiles, just to get kind of a basis for a starting point. And this is, I also then shot that match load group, which is what I wanted to kind of standardize things on. And that really told me that I was opening up. So I kind of got an idea of where that 140 liked to play, but it really didn't like to play where I thought it did. Usually the 140 ELDM likes somewhere around 50 to 70 thousandths off the lands, generally speaking. I wasn't seeing good results with that. And for a second, I thought, oh man, maybe I've shot out this barrel, but this thing only has 2,200 rounds on it, actually, 2,400. So I thought, nah, this should have a little more life in it. So I went up beyond that. And that's when I got into the 40, let me bring this up here and I'll put this up on the screen. As you can see here, I even played with the powder charge. So I was doing a whole lot of different things here, but I wanted to get my velocity up. My velocity had dropped off a little bit, and I was at 41.1, and through a lot of other testing I won't go into, I really ended up at 41.5 or 41.7. Now, if you look at this image here, what this really told me, this told me two things here. Number one, At 41.5, I had some decent results, as you can see. But at 80 thousandths off the lands, you can see that dip in the group. And really what we're looking for here, guys, is we're looking for some consistency, even across the groups, whether they're spread out, whether they're tight. That's going to tell you where you want to land as far as the seating depth is going. But the 41.7, that's why I drew these lines. I just roughly drew these red lines here. The 41.7 is telling me that's pretty consistent, even though when you look at 60 thousandths, it's opened up. At 70 thousandths, 80 thousandths, 90, it starts to come together. At 100 thousandths, it's right there. I mean, that's a darn good group at 0.3 inches. So that's what I wanted to run through, was that. Once I did that, I decided on my seating depth that I would go at 90 thousandths. So then I found my seating depth that I wanted to stick with. And then I added my EC tuner. Let me make sure that I've got the right thing here that I'm going to show you. Then I ran those into my EC tuner. And this is actually from the EC tuner video that I did. So as you can see, after tuning, I ended up with basically one hole there, right? Now these are 2-shot groups, so it's, but still one hole. You can see that it's 90 thousandths off the land. I might have said 95 before. It's 90 thousandths off the land. It's the 140 grain ELDM, 41.7 grains. So this is where I ended up with that load. Now, what I've got to do is what? Well, I got to do the same thing for the other two. So I'm going to do the same process for the 147 and the 140 boat tail hollow point. However, I have a really good idea where to really start with those seating depths. And that's based a little bit off of what I went through with the 140 ELDM, but it's also what I found out from this initial shooting that I did with those two, right? So I had the 147 here, the 140 boat tail hollow point. And I have a feeling that those two are going to end up very similar to that 140 ELDM. So, I mean, with that said, I just wanted to kind of go through this. I'm not going to do final thoughts. I do want to stress here, though, and make a big note that please do not use the numbers you have seen in this video for your loads. They are not your loads. That is not your barrel. That's my barrel. It's been eroded roughly 0.03 of an inch per 100 rounds through it. I don't load hot. But you have to do this for yourself. Don't take these numbers at all. You need to work up your own. I'm just telling you that what I have found is that the projectile that used to like jumping 60 thousandths, now with the erosion on this barrel, with everything that's gone through this barrel, increase in powder charge, it now is liking more of a 90 thousandths jump. I like seating that in that range, right? Because I've got a lot of room, I think, going up. So as those lands erode, you saw that at 100 thousandth, this thing was nailing it as well. So I'm very confident that I'm going to get another 800, 900 rounds out of this thing before I even have to do this again. Anyway, I hope this helped. I've tried to keep it short. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but I just wanted to talk to you about the process of what you're going to have to think about if you do what I'm doing. As I said, I use the 140 hollow, the boat tail hollow points for practice because they're cheaper. And I really only go out to about 800 yards with these. 700 is great as well. But the other thing you need to consider real quickly, then I'll let you go, is your kestrel. So if you've got a kestrel, make sure that you're putting in a profile for each one of these projectile and the cartridge that you marry with them into your kestrel. So when you get to the range to practice, if I'm practicing with the 140 boat tail hollow point, I have a profile in my kestrel, I move it to that, everything's ready, and now I'm hitting at 5, 6, 7, 800 yards, okay? So just make sure that you do all that you take all of that into consideration. And when everything, calms down and I can get my hands on a whole boatload of 140 ELDMs, I'll probably go back to those. But I'm telling you, these 147s are really doing well in this rifle, in this barrel. So I may even stick with them. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. Again, I appreciate the likes, subscriptions, the comments, and until next time, shoot straight.